their support, sharing their experiences transiting, and we are going to be kind of all hands on deck and really going hard on that, because I think that with the huge like university community that's building and more students are choosing to come to SFU for their education, we really do deserve and need like reliable, safe, and like environmentally friendly transit options for students to use in the long term. It's going to be big. We're working on a campaign plan, and we'll be talking about that at our University and Academic Affairs Committee meeting, which is happening on Friday. And I know a couple of counselors sit on that. So I'm really excited to see you there and to have that conversation. The next one that I'd like to talk about, so this is kind of a tentative win in a meeting with the SFU Associate Vice President Student International and Vice President Academic. We were told that the proctoring software pilot has been canceled and that they will no longer be using proctoring softwares in courses. This is huge. I was so thrilled to hear that. A lot of students were concerned about the privacy violations that came along with that. We're now just waiting on official, like a minuted kind of transfer of info from them to us so that we can make that announcement via social media and on our pages. But you shouldn't have any of those in your classes right now. So we've been fighting that this entire term. So I'm really thrilled to see that that's actually come to fruition. Some other big things that have happened have been the pass credit, no credit. I won't touch on that too much, as I know that council will want to have a conversation with that. However, we see a lot of issues with this only being applied to elective courses. One small thing that I can say, for example, is if you were to switch majors, something that maybe was an elective when you initially took it is now a required course for you. Would you have to repeat the course? That would be a waste of your time and money. We really want to make sure that the university is thinking about all the potential consequences before they implement this in a way that's not going to be fair. And we think that students, like a lot of us who are maybe senior students who have taken all of our electives so far and are really struggling during the pandemic now, it might be in our required courses. And I think that students should have the autonomy to make that decision for themselves, and that the university should provide all the information as to what may be the best choice for a student to use. So that's an ongoing conversation. Another big thing is that Clubs Days happened yesterday. Turnout was really good. A huge shout out to the SFSS staff who worked on this. They worked tirelessly last time and tirelessly this time to make it a success. I'm really glad that I got to see a lot of you there in your little booths and have a chat with some of you. And I hope that students enjoyed it. I think the virtual Clubs Days is something that may happen again in the upcoming semesters. So I'm glad that a platform like Hopin is available for us to use that is, I think, decently accessible, and we're going to be soliciting feedback as well to see how we can improve. The last thing I'll touch on is the Student Affordability Working Group. Myself and Gabe, our Vice President, University Relations, are working with the university to see where we can make changes in costs that are not necessarily tuition related, but things that kind of add to students' total bill when they graduate. So things like food security and access to nutritious and affordable food, access to course supplies and open educational resources and materials that will be cheaper than the ones that we have right now. And also looking into how we can help students plan their finances through a financial affordability calculator. So I know I've talked a lot. Those are just some highlights, some major projects we have going on. Any questions, any way that you're thinking you may want to get involved and help out with some of these, my email, I will leave it in the chat, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you all soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you also. VP External.
Hi, so a lot been going on. If you guys remember, in my last report, talked about postgraduate work permit extension campaign that was happening last semester. And a few weeks ago, we finally heard back from Minister of Immigration, and the postgraduate work permit has been extended by 18 months for former international students. That's a big win for us. That was a lot of work went in from ECA committee and other institution, and we have been working with GSS on this. So very happy movement for everyone. And last semester I also wrote a letter to higher education minister Melanie Mark and former minister Melanie Mark, and the position has been filled by Minister Annie Kang now. And also when I will be and also Matt from GSS will be meeting minister next month, hopefully, to talk about operating grants and other student-related issues in higher education, post-secondary institution. And I've been working with GSS to talk about advocacy office for international students, so that it would be we are still working on logistics and how we can actually found advocacy office and PC for all these post-secondary students who are studying and needs some kind of assistance regarding their immigration processes. That's still in logistic phase. There are a few other small things that's going on. ECA committee will be starting soon. We are just waiting for a few people to reply back on schedule and availability. And I think that was all from my side for now.
Thank you, Samad. VP Finance.
Hi, everyone. So this first month or so, I've been working on three main things. One is getting the annual budget process started, and I'll be giving a presentation on that later today. Working on getting my particular working group within the transition committee, the training and communications group, running. We've met last week and we'll be meeting again next week. And we're focused on developing the training system and communication system for the new council and going forward, starting from May 1st. And the third one is getting the pilot, the participatory budgeting pilot project up and running. This was approved by the board in December, and we set aside some money to reach out to have students vote on different projects to be funded that will be implemented in the following board year, or sorry, council year. Thank you.
Thank you, Corbett. We're now going to move on to our new business. Item 7.1, council roll call procedure. Motion reads, whereas in the survey for changing the roll call procedure, a majority of councilors voted in favor of the quick roll call procedure, whereas roll call of council meetings often takes between 15 and 30 minutes in our current virtual setting. Be it resolved that council adopt the following roll call procedure in lieu of current verbal roll call for the remainder of the council term. First bullet, when councilors enter the meeting, they will adjust their display name to include their pronouns along with their DSU/constituency group. Bullet 2, when the council chair calls for roll call, all present councilors will enter their DSU/constituency group and accessibility needs in the chat. Point 3, councilors will then be responsible for reading the messages of all other councilors to be informed of the access needs of other councilors. Would anyone like to move this motion?
I'll move the motion.
Zach moves. Would anyone like to second?
Geography seconds.
Geography seconds. Going to open the floor for discussion. Just for everyone to know who might be new here, if you'd like to speak on a motion, you just need to type list in the chat, and based on the order of whoever's listed, I will call on you to speak. Additionally, if there are any comments that you need to directly reply to, which either are directly addressed towards you or in some way are an affront, you can type a star in the chat and I will immediately allow you to speak. Yes, Ryan.
Thanks, Abe. Having kind of brought this discussion item up at the last council meeting and then having put forth the motion, I just wanted to kind of speak up and maybe clarify some of the intentions behind it, and then also kind of address some of the comments that were made kind of in the Discord chat. I think the intention behind the motion is kind of identifying that, you know, council does meet once every 2 weeks and we meet for an hour and a half, and using that time as effectively as we can is, I think, you know, priority of all of us. And I saw that the roll call procedure seemed to be an area that we could spend less time and then spend more time discussing topics that pertain to our actual duties. And so looked for ways to improve it. In terms of Devin, I believe, sent in a briefing note to everyone over email, which was very thorough and appreciate that. In terms of just kind of clarify some of the kind of the intention behind the roll call procedure. The roll call procedure would be in lieu of a verbal roll call. So I am in complete agreement that, doing a verbal roll call while avoiding accessibilities and pronouns and even name truthfully doesn't make any difference if you still have to go through the present or no response. The idea is that if we, remove it all to the chat, it can happen in a matter of minutes rather than, spending longer time, taking those extra 10 or so minutes to actually discuss items that we are discussing. Now, I believe in the Discord chat, Gabe had brought up a point that we may be legally required to do a verbal roll call. So I'd be happy to hear more about that being the case. And if it is a case we're required to do a verbal roll call, I truthfully don't see any benefit in this motion at all.
Thank you, Ryan. Gabe, before I let you speak, actually, yes, Gabe, you may speak first.
Thanks, Aid. So my comment in the Discord channel came from more of a concern around just making sure that council is covering their legal bases when considering this motion. My concern mainly comes around, per Robert's rules, of course, to actually start a meeting, you need to have established quorum. And traditionally, the way that that is done under Robert's rules is by verbal roll call, or else if that is not done, then the meeting cannot proceed because then it is assumed that there is no quorum. So what I'm trying to convey is that, to save your bases in that way, to make sure you have quorum, you will most likely, you should be, under Robert's rules, be doing a verbal roll call anyway. So my concern, or I guess what I'm just trying to say is that if you're going to be saying, if you're going to be required to verbally state, okay, archaeology representative, are you present? Yes, I don't really think that there is any point really in then axing pronouns and access needs along with that, because you're already going to be required to be spending time verbally saying present, blah, 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 blah. But, also looking at it from a different angle, other than legality, I do want to just express that I think that saying pronouns and access needs verbally is very important. Putting aside legal principles for a minute, it's just something that we can do to make sure that everyone in our meetings, in council meetings, and your meetings are comfortable, and that everyone is aware of everyone's access needs. If we're trying to create a inclusive and comfortable environment for everyone to be able to participate in the, peaceful engage of ideas, I think that it is important for all of those to be expressed verbally as well. I do think there are ways to speed it up without having to axe it completely. For example, everyone should, be listening very intently. And as soon as the chair calls on you, unmute your mic, speak, or have it typed in the chat if you don't have a mic, and be prepared to hit enter immediately. Just so, we can keep going and going and going. I remember when last year when I was chair of council, of course, it was still in-person meetings, but we were able to get through it quite quickly, maybe under maybe 7 to 10 minutes at most. It is a bit more complicated because it's online. However, there are ways to speed it up, I think, without sacrificing the important component of pronouns and access needs. So yeah, thank you for letting me speak to the motion.
Thank you, Gabe. Devin, you have the floor.
I just actually had a question for Ryan regarding his motion. And when you were putting it forth, were you wanting everything to be in chat, or were you wanting still Zaid would call out and then you would put your name and stuff in chat? I was just a little confused about how the motion would like how we would see it and how it would see it work, because if we have to verbally state we're present, or was it to put everything in the chat so we never unmute ourselves until discussion time usually, or?
Ryan?
Yeah, for sure. The intention was to do everything in the chat to kind of remove the verbal component altogether. Kind of to Gabe's point on the kind of requiring us to meet quorum. through a verbal roll call. I had kind of just through attending council meetings, it seems like we don't ever enter our roll call until Zaid sees in participants in our meeting that we've actually reached quorum, usually by counting councilors or however Zaid does that. Usually it's like, oh, it looks like we met quorum. I'll call the meeting to order now. So I don't know I don't know if we've actually got to roll call before without having quorum. But to your other points, and I think a lot of the points that Devin brought up in her briefing note as well, having that space to say, your accessibility needs and pronouns is certainly space. Like, I think there's a huge benefit to that. In our Discord chat, there were people who, have or present their access needs who felt that they didn't feel quite as comfortable sharing them verbally. And you actually, Devin brought up some good points about other avenues that they could express those. So just kind of hearing those thoughts, it seemed that, maybe there were people who didn't necessarily feel as comfortable expressing them verbally, and this wouldn't necessarily hinder that accessibility of the meeting by doing it in the chat. But if that's the case, then obviously we don't need to vote on it or agree with it.
Right. Thank you, Ryan. Serena?
Yeah, so I've spoken or got some feedback from DNA, and our concern is that as council tries to make these meetings more accessible, and we now have the same link for all the meetings and might be sending them out publicly and that kind of thing, it does bring up cause for concern, because I know it wasn't the intention, but there could be cases where a student has low vision or is using a screen reader, and unfortunately Zoom just isn't that accessible. So I feel like we could be making these meetings more inaccessible than they need to be. And sometimes a verbal roll call is needed for things like captioning, especially if we don't have a paid captioner at these meetings. I think it would make it a bit more inaccessible. So I, on behalf of DNA, will be voting against this motion.
Thank you, Serena. Awesome.
One thing that might be helpful in your consideration is that it will not be long before council meetings are extended to like 3 hours long. There won't be so much an issue with the time cap. And also I hear, Ryan mentioning that he does feel that there is value in, sharing pronouns and access needs. And I'm also hearing Serena and the feedback that they received from DNA. I would hate for this to become an issue where we're deciding what's important and what's not. Something else that we do during roll call and during the beginning of the meeting is that we do a territorial acknowledgement. And I worry that we're kind of paving the way to even cut out something like a territorial acknowledgement because it's on the agenda or something like that. And we don't feel that it's important, even though there are students who, even though it is important, just like, giving students an avenue to share their pronouns and their access needs, as we're hearing here today. I would hate to make things inaccessible and, silence students unnecessarily just for the sake of efficiency. That'll be up to council to decide, but I don't think the time constraint is a really legitimate reason in this case.
Thank you, also. Alvin?
Yeah, I understand the motion spirit as to reduce the time for meetings, given that council will now be the new board. And I think a better place to look personally would be to implement a voting system for contentious motions. I think Zoom is good enough for that at the moment, but as soon as we become the board, listing who is against, for, and abstain would be more important. I know of a tool that my external organization uses. I can see if I can have them kind of give it to us or modify it to our needs, and it has authentication behind it. So I think a better area to look would be voting regarding contentious motions.
Thank you, Alvin. Regarding that, the time that we do take for voting on motions, yes, for contentious motions, we're taking more time now to go through roll call voting, just so that we can list specifically who is for or against. as using Zoom polls it doesn't show. So that is something we can look at. I'll reach out to you regarding that software that you were speaking about, and we can see if that's something that we can use while also keeping accountability for voting in council. Devin, you have the floor.
Thanks. I was also wanting to highlight, I think that this motion does bring up an important discussion of accessibility needs and pronouns. And I think brought up in the Discord by multiple members of council, it's important that we note that you can message the chair or Zaid independently, saying like maybe it should be brought up at the beginning of meetings that you can message independently with access needs or concerns, and that you don't need to state them publicly. Further, you do not need to publicly state your pronouns or access needs if they do not feel comfortable to you. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that. I also think it's great, as much as we go through the pronouns and it's important to create that space, there's a lot of us, so if you could put your pronouns beside your name, it's a lot also helpful in just remembering everyone and making sure that we're creating a safe space.
Thank you, Devin. Would anyone else like to speak on this motion? Yes, Liz.
Hi, I'll just keep this very brief, but I just wanted to say that the English Student Union supports the statement, the briefing note that the GSWSSU sent out. I think it was mentioned last meeting as well that the way that we take roll call with pronouns and accessibility needs created sort of a precedent for other meetings and other groups to follow. And I think it's really important that we don't go back on that and we don't stop that. Because if we do, who knows who else will. And we need to keep moving forward instead of taking steps back. Yeah, thank you. I guess I don't support this motion.
Thank you, Liz. Is there any further discussion? So just regarding what was said earlier, Ryan, if you do not want to have this motion voted on any longer, you can move to postpone the motion indefinitely and we can vote on that, and it'll essentially be removed from the agenda. If you do want to go forward with it, however, we can go forward with a vote. That's entirely up to you guys. Anyone actually can move to postpone motions either to a specific time or indefinitely. That's entirely up to council. So again, just going to call for any discussion on this motion. Yes, Ryan.
I'll just kind of give a final comment and then make that movement. But I think, I guess, to a clarification again, a bit of the intent. I don't want the intent of this motion to be seen as moving backwards. I think it was to simply find a different avenue to still express and reach the same level of accessibility and inclusion that we had before. But seeing kind of the comments in this meeting, particularly from people who are recognizing or identifying that this is not something that's going to accomplish that, I'll move to postpone this motion definitely.
All right, thank you, Ryan. I do think it's clear to everyone, honestly, that the intent was not something to take away space from people, but rather for giving us more time to speak on motions and things like that. So I do want to thank you, though, for working on this motion, and also for Devin with writing such a thorough, informative briefing note. It's really great to see both of you being engaged with matters on council. Yes, Wei Chun.
Yeah, just a point of order. What's the purpose of postponing the motion instead of just voting on it or just withdrawing the motion? Like,
well, postponing indefinitely is the same as withdrawing it. I'm pretty sure when you postpone indefinitely, it's basically dead. So the motion is postponed indefinitely. You cannot pick it up. It's just never going to be voted on. So it's essentially the same thing. Hopefully that answers your question. All right, so if we were to withdraw, we just need to seek unanimous consent, right?
Let me double check. I'm actually looking it up right now.
All right. Ryan, if you can state that you'd like to withdraw the motion, then I will seek unanimous consent on it.
I'd like to move to withdraw this motion.
All right, thank you, Ryan.
So Zaid.
Yep.
So I just looked it up, and it basically, the mover of the motion, so that would be Ryan, can request that the motion be withdrawn. The chair can ask for unanimous consent, and if there is unanimous consent, then you can just move on. If there is objection, the chair can put withdrawing the motion to a vote. And if that passes, then of course the motion has been withdrawn.
All right, thank you. So Ryan did just state that he would like to withdraw the motion. I'm going to seek unanimous consent then. And seek unanimous consent. If you'd like to dissent, please make yourself known now. Seeing no objections, this motion has been withdrawn. We're now going to move on to presentation, item 8.1, SFSS budgets. Corbett, VP Finance, you have the floor.
Great, just give me 1 minute to share my screen. Just 1 second. So, hi everyone. So I am here to present this to you about the SFSS's budget development process, the annual budget, and to give you a bit of a financial introduction and overview of the SFSS, especially for the new counselors here today, or new counselors for this term. And I'm going to try not, there's a lot in the SFSS finances, so I can't go as full detail as I'd like, because we'd be here for like an hour. But I can go do a kind of a Clip Notes version, and then I'll be setting up additional consultation times throughout the rest of this term as part of the process, and I'll go over that a bit, and then we can have much more of a deep dive in those sessions. So the goal of the presentation is giving an overview of the SFSS's general revenue and expenses, as well as the development process and some key items to think about for the next fiscal year. The fiscal year starts for May 1st until the following April 30th of the following year, and that's So it doesn't fit the calendar year. It's a little bit offset, and that can confuse students and boards. So the SFSS financial review, primarily the majority of our operations come out of the general fund. And by operations, I mean things like our staff pay, the board fees, the board stipends, our programming and initiatives or campaigns, almost everything comes out of the general fund. And it's also where our main membership fee is pooled into. Other fees like space expansion fund fee, health and dental fund fee that gets charged in the fall, or prorated charged in the spring or summer. The accessibility fund, the First Nations fund, and the bill SFE levy all have separate dedicated funds for them, and those are tracked separately. And is tracked, and you can look at how much was spent and stuff in the previous fiscal year with our financial statements, which are posted on our website. Collectively, all these funds and all your membership fees work out to be about $11 to $12 million a year, which is quite a bit of money. The majority of that goes to health and dental plan. About 5 million goes to there. About 6 million goes to the Build SFV fund. Sorry, about 5 million goes to each, and then the remaining goes into the general fund. And that's just the fees. There's also additional revenue that comes in through like interest and others aspects. That's why it doesn't exactly all add up to the full amount if you were looking at the audit versus this presentation. The general revenue fund, general fund revenue is majority of it comes from the SFS membership fee, and there's also another batch from the FIC membership fee. We have a service agreement with Fraser International College, where they pay a number of students SFS fees, and they get some services out of it and be able to be members of our clubs and a number of other things. We also have health and dental plan admin fee. So we take a small percentage of fees that are collected from the health and dental plan to pay for anything that relates to us running the plan. Though the majority of the health plan is administered by Student Care. It's a third-party company that helps with the brokering and consultation and administration. But there is some small stuff from time to time on our side, and we just collect some additional fees on that, especially if we have to do something like a big process where we're going out to seek, we do like a public call for like a new contract with different companies. That can take a bit of time and money on our end. So we usually have money set aside for that cost. We also have some rent revenue that we get from, or will be getting from, a coffee shop and a convenience store in the Student Union building. In the past, we were in charge of the NBC food court, and we received all the revenue from that. However, we sold that back to SFU along with the pub space back in 2018, I believe. And as part of the deal for that, we get a certain percentage of the food court revenue from NBC for the next 7 or 8 years going forward. And then also we have some interest revenue from our bank accounts and such. And sometimes we have advertising revenue from, you may have seen, some of those charging stations that have little computer screen on them that shows advertisements. Companies come in and do that, and then we get a little bit of cut from that. There's also commissions and a lot of other little things are basically like $100 a year, so they're almost nothing. A number of also different departments have a few small revenue generating abilities, like a good example is the semester poster sales. The one they in AQ, they'll have on the North AQ, they'll have the whole side is a whole bunch of posters. We're the ones who actually they work through us, and we're the ones actually that book the space and things like that. It's a group called Imagine Us. So for a long time, I thought that was just an SFE thing, and it's an SFS thing. Yeah. And so collectively for just the general fund, that collects around with all these revenue added up, it collects just over 3 million a year on average. It is slowly going up because as we get more enrollment numbers for more students coming in, obviously that will increase our revenue. Sorry, I just saw a few chat options, but okay. So here's a chart. It really shows the stark difference between revenue, where basically the vast majority of our fees, or our revenue comes in from student fees. We have a bit of other stuff, and there is some future revenue options with a sub where we could maybe book out some rooms to external companies like the ballroom and stuff from every once in a while to generate some additional revenue. That's something we'll have to discuss in the future. But we are, from a financial perspective, we're highly sensitive to how the student fees are, whether they get increased or decreased through referendum questions or through enrollment numbers through SFU. Like there, at the start of this last fiscal year, there was a concern with the pandemic having a significant reduction in enrollment numbers that would have initially was projected to be that we would have like a $300,000 to $500,000 deficit this year. Fortunately, that didn't occur, and we're actually on a good financial standing. But at the start of the year, there was a significant concern that we'd have to cut services. but fortunately that didn't happen. Expenses. General fund covers a lot of things. As I said, it's the main operating fund. So everything from different offices like the finance office costs, it's for basically paying for our accountants. Member services that covers events, clubs, student unions, and our Surrey campus. We have a office for helping with campaigns, research, and policy. Sarah Edmond, she supports this group as well. Communications office, administration office, board director and council stipends, and other expenses related to that, from like training to retreats to other stuff. The Women's Center on campus, First Nations Student Association has some costs. They have some staff now that we pay out of. And there's a bunch of other ones that are just, if you look at the consolidated budget online, there's just a whole bunch of different things that go into this. And the costs are average around about $3 million a year. It goes up and down a lot based on spending or revenue, shifts in revenue. For instance, FIC is probably expected to have lower revenue, low enrollment than normal going forward, because until things kind of stabilize with, because almost all their students are international students, so some can't, come to Canada, or some they just not enrolling until things get better with COVID. So for them, if they're down say 20 or so percent in their enrollment numbers, which is that works out to be about 100,000 less for us per year. So it does have impact. But fortunately, most offices do often come in under budget. We tend to run a more conservative, each office usually runs some level of like internal contingency where they don't try to use their whole budget. So every time I've looked at the audits versus the budget, like the audit cost versus that relevant budget that year, often there's a bit of a small surplus. So that's just a bit of financial overview. The whole budgeting process itself is it can be fairly lengthy. Most of the budgeting goes to work into the general fund because, again, it's the most heavily used space. So what we do is I've already held an initial meeting with the finance office, key administration, and board members, and we've reviewed our current financial situation with SFSS, reviewed any significant fixed or scheduled costs for the following year. So in this case, this year is a big one. And I'll kind of go into more detail near the end of the presentation. We also review any significant changes in operations, finances, and such. So these are like core things about the organization. And then I send a request to departmental coordinators to ask for them to send programming budgets, departmental budgets, which I've already done, and I've got to receive a few back, but I'll receive a few more over the next month or so. And then we start holding budget information sessions with board and council. And that like this, like if I had one for board, I did it last week, and I'm doing it this is the first session for council. And after this, then future sessions will be about consultation with council. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to do this. I'm also open to ideas, but probably be more effective to break up into smaller groups and do some kind of consultation either at the council meetings or separately. I'll work with Zaid and Helen and others, whoever's interested, to come up with a really couple good sessions so that everyone has a chance to give feedback or pitch ideas. Then the next step is we'll review all these department budgets in the feedback and operation needs and develop a first draft budget in late February. Then we'll hold another round of consultations, get feedback on that with board and council, and we'll develop a second draft in late March. And then the board will approve a preliminary budget in April, and council then will approve the final budget in May. This is a new thing that we've put in, that normally the outgoing board approves all the budgets, and an incoming board just kind of has to accept it. But now we felt that it's important for the next board to also have a say in the budget they've inherited, and if they need to make any changes or not. Okay, because there's been some years there's not much of an option because maybe finance is really tight. But if there's years where there is options available, then I think the new board should have, or the new council in this case, should have a say on some funding. Okay. So key items for this next fiscal year. So the student union building operation will be fully in the budget. Past years, because there was always like, hey, it's going to be finished, they always had to make estimates on when the sub would actually be operating, when the organization of the SFS would actually be operating as a sub. And so a lot of times the numbers would be like 6 months of this or 3 months of that. But now we've already fully moved over. We've given up all our MC space except for forum chambers, undergrounds, and the peak office area. And we'll be operating out of the sub completely. And so that'll change our budgeting to quite a bit for our building operating costs. This is covered by the Builders FE levy, so there's more than enough being collected now to be able to cover for that. We're expecting to have longer operating hours in the sub, which means potentially increasing staff support for certain offices like clubs and events and a few other things that are very student-facing heavy. And the upcoming budget will be affected by the results of the collective agreement between the SFS and its union staff, which we'll be getting in late January and early February. And finally, there is some uncertainty around the start of in-person classes and activities. Currently, most virtual events are much cheaper to run. So if that ends up, for whatever reason, going further into next fiscal year, we might end up having quite a bit of underspending in our budget, which then we can shift back into maybe bursaries or some other form. That'll be up to the next board and next council to ultimately decide. The final thing that's not on this thing is the stadium is actually should be finishing within this term. They've been pushed back a lot too, just like the sub due to COVID, but they're getting pretty close. And when that happens, then a bunch of payments, we have to start making contributions to the stadium. And there's a schedule of payments, and I'm just double checking if there's been any changes or updates over the last number of years. This will all come out of the Build SFE levy. And again, there's enough money in there to cover it all, but it's just something so no one, I like to talk to students about this ahead of time so that no one's surprised when they're looking at, if they're for the few students that like to look at the budget, they don't start seeing these big numbers and get really concerned. So these are, yeah. So yeah, I'm open now up to questions.
Thank you, Corbett. I think we had one question regarding how much the SFSS student fees are.
Yeah, sure. Give me a minute to, I don't have them memorized on the top of my head, but I can get a quick look on the SFS website.
If anyone has questions, you can list yourself in the chat, or you can type out your question and Corbett or I will read them out.
So yeah, the SS website has the most updated breakdown of all the student fees. A number of these fees also here listed, like say for CJSF, PEAK, SF PERG, WESC, the student refugee program, and NBARC are actually what we call carry through or pass through, where we're acting as their agent. Just like SFU collects fees on our behalf and pass it to us, they also collect fees on behalf of these other groups and we pass it to them. So you're paying to it, but those are individual independent student size and they have their own fees. Yeah, thanks for the link, Wei Chen. As for like, I could do another breakdown for how much gets collected per fee, but it'll take a little bit longer. So I can do that. I can send that to Zaid and he can send that out to the council afterwards if you're curious. Additionally, another way to look at things, one kind of rule of thumb I like to use when kind of figuring out how, because there's 26,000 students, or roughly around 26,000 students at SFU, and we charge fees 3 times a year, depending on if you're taking classes and also if you're taking, one class of 3 credits or more. There's different rates that you pay. A good rule of thumb to estimate is that for every $1 you pay in SFS fees overall, generates about $65,000 a year, which is, to frame that, that's the equivalent of paying like 1 full-time and maybe a part-time student staff person, or that's like, so about $5 or $7 per term, per term. Works out to be about how much give me 1 second. spent about 200 and something thousand on club grants. So that works out to be about $3 or $4 each. So it's not to say that, you know, the fund that's your amount of money you're contributing is minor. It's not. It's just that there's so many people that it doesn't take very much money for us to all collectively pitch in to have impact. So yeah. So if you ever also see online where people say, oh, we should just drop students fees down to $1, so then you can think, well, that only would generate about $60,000 in revenue a year. You know, do you have an idea what you'd use that money for? Like, I mean, what would pay for it and what we wouldn't be able to pay for it? So it's a lot.
Thank you, Corbett. Thank you for this presentation. It's quite informative and interesting to see a little bit of more of a higher level breakdown of some of the revenue and everything.
Sure. Oh, one last little thing. Sorry to cut you off, Zaid. One of the things also is a lot of our staff, especially the union staff, are student facing. I'm still working on a way to like break it down properly, but the vast majority, like almost all of our member services staff, so for clubs, events, and student union constituent group supports, a lot of those staff work with students more directly. A lot of other staff from the finance, the communications, and campaign stuff support either those groups or committees or the organization to support students. So when you look at the budget, you'll see some big numbers for staffing costs. But again, the vast majority of those people are working in some form with students more directly. It's not just sitting in an office, reading emails. So I just wanted to make sure people understand that, because it's something I didn't understand for a long time myself, even when I go through the budget and stuff.
All right, thank you, Corbett. Alvin?
Yeah, Corbett, you asked for suggestions on holding information sessions and consultation sessions. I have one suggestion particularly. So for myself, I'm aware of some of the aspects of the revenue and expenses, but I'm also unaware of some other aspects. So I was wondering if you could, for the sessions, separate them by different aspects. So for example, one session could be dedicated solely towards membership fees or not membership fees, member services and office fees. And another could be on the building and the sub and all that.
I'm happy to do that. That's actually a really good idea. And it's a lot easier to break it down and focus it on specific areas.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, because one of the issue I always had with leading some of the budgets and stuff is that they really lack context. You know, you just see big numbers and why is banking costing, $10,000 a year or something like that? Like I'm happy to do that.
That sounds good. Thank you, Corbett. We'll talk about how we want to do future budget info and kind of consultation sessions with council, whether that's some kind of special meeting in our regular meetings or some form of joint board council meetings. We can figure that out. Other questions, anyone? All right, seeing no more questions, I'm going to move on then to our discussion items. So 9.1, Transition Steering Committee update. So this was just an item to basically hear from our counselors here and maybe even some of the board members. I believe the three here, also Gabe and Corbett, are all running one of the subcommittees from the TSC, just to hear an update on kind of what's been going on, what kind of progress has been made. I'd like to hear from the counselors, especially about how that's been going with developing policies and working on developing training for our next executive. Gabe, Corbett, also, would either of you like to speak on it a bit, give a brief update on how the transition steering committee has been going? Corbett?
Yeah, sorry, I was reading quickly, catching up on an email. So my particular committee is the Training and Communications Committee, and we, like I said, we met last week as an introductory meeting, and we reviewed our goals, our timelines, and kind of reporting requirements, or rather, yeah, what we need to produce. We also reviewed the what's been covered for dev sessions this year and this board year, as well as the costs associated with it. And that's really about it. We were only able to meet for about an hour, and so it was really very much introductory. We'll be meeting next week on the 28th. And I'm going to so I'm going to be inviting some relevant staff as well that would be supporting the communications and the work of the committee, sorry, the working group. And we'll start working on fleshing out things like what kind of training that should be seen by the new council. And I'd also like to explore specialized training for specific committees. So one example is, we'll be having federal lobby days coming up pretty soon. And it'd be useful for the relevant committee members that are going to be doing lobbying to actually get, work on training around how do you lobby government? How do you word things? Is there specific people we need to talk to? What's their platforms? What is the government pushing for? So that can give us better ideas on what might be more successful for lobbying. So also like to approach so executive committee is going to be doing a lot of day-to-day. So some of the training might be more operations focused and how to, look at for red flags or budgeting or all these other things, but also the general kind of SFS 101 and governance 101 things that the council collectively needs to learn. So we'll be exploring all that over the next month or so, and then starting to put down our plan and our training, our recommended training schedule for comment and consultation.
Awesome, great to hear. I was just wondering, for your working group, what is the composition like? Who are the members?
Sure, it's me, Jennifer, and Wei Chun on the board side. Then we also have Devin as one of the council reps, and Nim Basra as a student union, kind of a student at large that's interested in helping out.
Okay, good to know. Thank you, Gabe.
Thanks, Aid. And yeah, just I guess for context, the Transition Steering Committee kind of has three main working groups that have been tasked with a specific area of the transition. So Corbett talked about his training. It's called the Training and Communications Working Group, which he chairs. The Governance Working Group, which I chair, and the Operations Working Group, which Osip chairs. So in terms of my working group has not yet met. I am in the process of setting up a meeting for an initial meeting for that working group, much as Corbett had his first introductory meeting this week. However, I have communicated with the working group and kind of sent some documentation and initial kind of things to start thinking about, such as making sure that everyone is kind of familiar with the current SFSS board policies as we look to transforming them into SFSS council policies, in addition to a number of other governing documents, including some other policy documents from other universities too, such as the UBC AMS, which has a similar governing system as us, or that we will, in terms of having a council and then a smaller executive committee. Personally, myself, as chair of this working group, I have started kind of looking at our current SFSS board policies and started ripping it apart and reorganizing it and figuring out what needs to be changed, removed, transformed so that it fits more perfectly with our new governance structure. So it's very much in the kind of still introductory and kind of formative stage. So as soon as I have some more substantive updates, I will bring those to council as well.
Thank you, Gabe. I was also wondering the composition for yours as well.
So on my working group, I chair it as one of the board reps. Ryan V and Helen are reps from council on the working group, as well as Nim Basra is also on my working group, as well as one of the student union executives representatives on my working group.
Thank you. Asab, you have the floor.
Not a huge update. I kind of gave a briefing during my report earlier, but I'll be setting up a meeting for the operations working group shortly. Essentially, we're going to be looking at staffing models and any new staff positions that may need to be created in like preparation for the new council kind of coming in, and pretty much any other operations related tasks. So we will be having our first meeting soon on that working group. From council side is Callie, and Zach Thompson, who is a student union rep, is also on that working group. So just the three of us. Yeah, it'll be fun.
Mhm. All right, thank you. Yeah, it's great to hear. Just wanting to check in and see how things are going with the transitions, the TSC. Something that I was thinking about was recommending to expand the composition to include more counselors, so that there are more people on deck with these different working groups to help with developing new policies and the training program, and also with working on the staff positions. So that's why I was asking to see the composition. So there are only, say, 3 members on the governance working group, and then 4 on the operations side. So I was just wondering if that's something you guys might be interested in, so we can include some more counselors also.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gabe can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure anyone who's a member in good standing can be on the working group. So if there are counselors who are interested in the operations working group, that would be great, because we are under the terms of reference technically say that there needs to be at least 4. So additional members are more than welcome.
Awesome. Gabe?
Yeah, Asab's right. Pretty much anyone who wants to get involved in the working groups can just attend the meetings, and you can participate just like everyone else. So if you're interested in any of these 3 working groups, you can contact me as chair of the overall transition steering committee, or directly to Corbett or Asab if either of their working groups pique your interest. So, but absolutely, as Zaid, I agree. I would love to have some more council representation on these working groups.
Great, thank you. I was just also wondering maybe if we could put some of the meeting links or things in the Discord as well, to make it a bit more accessible for those who do want to drop in to just see what kind of progress is being made, and also to contribute ideas and help work with you guys. We might get a little bit more, I guess, engagement for people who might not be able to commit to coming all the time. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah, maybe you can create a sub channel for the committee, and I can go ahead and put updates in there as we get them.
All right, I'll do that. I think that's really all then for this discussion item, and seeing that we are at 6 o'clock, I'm going to move to then postpone item 9.2 until council's next meeting. So I'm going to move to postpone discussion item 9.2 until council's next meeting on February the 3rd. Anyone like to second this motion?
Women's Center seconds.
Women's Center Collective seconds. Is there any discussion? Any objections? Seeking unanimous consent. If you'd like to dissent, please object now. Seeing no objections, this motion to postpone carries. This is an important discussion that we will be having next meeting. So I would like all of you to please read over the attached document if you haven't already, and be prepared for discussion on it next meeting. Yes, item 11, announcements. Our next council meeting will be February 3rd, keeping with our bi-weekly meeting schedule. We're now on to item 12, adjournment. 12.1, be it resolved to adjourn the meeting at 6:02 p.m. Would anyone like to move this motion?
Statistics moves.
Soka moves.
Sorry, was that statistics?
Yep.
Statistics moves. Soko, would you like to second?
Yes, please. Soka seconds.
Soko seconds. Seeing no discussion, we'll move to vote. Seeking unanimous consent once again. If you'd like to object, please do so now. Seeing no objections, this motion carries. Our meeting is over today. Thank you everyone for attending, and I'll see you on February 3rd.